The morning had started beautifully, one of those rare, peaceful days when the sunlight comes through the kitchen window at just the right angle, warming the tiles and making the whole house feel alive. I was cooking oatmeal for my daughter Lily, while she sat in her recliner near the window, her small fingers tapping lightly on the armrest in excitement. Lily was disabled from birth. She had severe respiratory muscle weakness, meaning she couldn't breathe fully on her own. Her oxygen concentrator hummed steadily beside her, its rhythm as familiar as a heartbeat. With it running, she could sit up, laugh, watch cartoons, and even hum along to her favorite songs. Without it, she wouldn't last long. But today was peaceful, or at least it was supposed to be. We had moved into this neighborhood only 6 months ago, partly for the quiet streets, partly for the good air quality doctors recommended, and partly because I had been assured the HOA here was calm and responsible. That's what the realtor had said. She forgot to mention the one person everyone feared, Karen. Her real name didn't matter. Everyone called her Karen, and she lived up to it proudly. She saw herself as the guardian of the neighborhood, its rules, its image, its perfection, and she hated anything that disrupted the aesthetic. She hated trash cans on the curb for more than 30 minutes. She hated cars parked facing the wrong direction. She hated kids drawing chalk on sidewalks. But most of all, she hated us, not because we did anything wrong, but because she said Lily's oxygen machine was too loud. Too loud. A low, soft hum that wasn't louder than a refrigerator. A machine that kept a child alive. To her, it was an eyesore, annoying, and lowering the neighborhood's peaceful ambiance. So for 6 months, we ignored her complaints, her letters, her notes taped to our door. We ignored the times she shouted through the fence, telling us we were scaring away buyers. We ignored her threats to handle it herself. We thought she was bluffing. We didn't think she'd ever go after a disabled child. We were wrong. The trouble started around 10:45 a.m. Lily was watching her favorite cartoon, her eyes bright, her smile soft and warm. I could tell she was having a good breathing day, which meant fewer medical checks and less tension in the house. I had just stepped into the kitchen to wash dishes when I heard gravel crunching outside our window. I peeked through the blinds. Karen, marching across my yard like she owned it, a clipboard in hand, her mouth twisted into that familiar scowl. I sighed. Not today, I muttered. I stepped outside before she could knock. What do you want now, Karen? I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. She didn't return the courtesy. The HOA received multiple noise complaints this week. Your oxygen machine is over the decibel limit allowed for exterior noise. It's inside the house, I said. You can barely hear it on the porch. It doesn't matter, she snapped. The rules apply regardless of the source. I rubbed my temples, trying to stay patient. It's medical equipment. It's necessary. Her eyes rolled. Look, I'm sure your situation is difficult, but you're renting, aren't you? This neighborhood has standards. If you can't meet them, maybe you should find one more suited to. She waved her hand like we were some kind of pest. Your needs? My jaw tightened. We're not moving. And you don't get to tell us where we belong. Karen leaned in closer, lowering her voice so Lily wouldn't hear through the window. Then I'll do what I have to do. Rules are rules. I didn't know what she meant at the time. I thought she meant another complaint. Letter. Another pointless meeting. Another argument. I didn't think she meant she would put my child's life in danger. Around noon, Lily began to doze off in her chair. I wrapped a small blanket around her legs, kissed her forehead, and stepped into the backyard to bring in the laundry from the line. The air was crisp and clean. It felt good to breathe. What I didn't know was that Karen was still lurking, watching, waiting. For a moment when I wasn't right beside Lily, I didn't hear the front door open. I didn't hear Karen slip inside. I didn't hear her footsteps as she marched straight toward the oxygen machine, but Lily did. She woke up suddenly, her eyes darting around the room in confusion as the shadow of a person approached the device that kept her alive. She couldn't shout. She couldn't call for help. All she could do was whimper and tap her fingers rapidly against her chair, a sign of panic. Karen reached the machine. Her lips curled into disgust. This thing is so loud. No wonder the neighbors are complaining. You people shouldn't even be here. And then she did the unthinkable. She reached down and switched off the oxygen concentrator. Lily's eyes widened. Immediately, her chest tightened. Her breaths became shallow, sharp. Terrified little gasps that couldn't pull in enough air. Karen didn't even look at her. Maybe now you'll finally get the hint, she muttered, turning to leave. By the time I came in the house less than 2 minutes later, Lily was slumped sideways, her lips turning a faint shade of blue, her hands shaking uncontrollably. The room was too quiet. The machine wasn't humming. My heart stopped. Lily. I sprinted across the living room, reaching her in seconds. Her eyes were half-lidded, panicked, pleading. She was trying desperately to breathe, her chest rising but not filling. I looked down. The oxygen concentrator was turned off. Double quotes. No. I slammed the switch back on. The machine beeped, booting up slowly, painfully slowly, like it didn't understand that every second counted. I grabbed the portable oxygen tank from the emergency bag and hooked it to her cannula with shaking hands. Come on, baby. Breathe. breathe. I cradled her, rocking her gently, whispering, begging her to stay with me. After nearly 10 agonizing seconds, her chest lifted properly this time. A full breath, then another. The blue tint faded slowly from her lips. Her trembling eased, but her eyes were still full of fear. "It's okay," I whispered, tears falling onto her blanket. "I've got you. Daddy's here." But inside, I wasn't calm. Inside, I knew exactly what had happened. Karen had been here. She had touched my child's life support equipment. She had tried to force us out of the neighborhood by cutting off my daughter's oxygen. And as I held Lily close, one promise formed in my mind, cold, sharp, and unbreakable. This wasn't ending with a complaint. I was taking Karen down. I held Lily close for nearly 20 minutes before her breathing returned to something steady and safe. Even then, her tiny hands trembled against my shirt, gripping the fabric like she was afraid I might disappear too. I kept whispering soothing words, running my hand through her soft hair, but inside I was a storm. My heart felt like a clenched fist. My jaw kept tightening until my temples ached. There are moments in life that break something inside you quietly, suddenly, without warning. This was one of those moments. When my daughter's breath started to normalize, I wrapped her in her blanket, turned the oxygen back to its optimal flow, and kissed her forehead. "You stay right here, baby. Daddy needs to take care of something." She blinked slowly, her eyes heavy with exhaustion. She had no idea what had happened to her. She had no way of knowing the reason she nearly suffocated was because a grown woman, fully aware, fully sane, and fully malicious, had turned off the machine keeping her alive. But I knew, and I wasn't letting it slide. I stepped outside, my hands still trembling. At first, I turned toward Karen's house. I wanted to march up to her door, pound on it until it cracked, and demand every answer she didn't deserve to speak. But then I stopped. A confrontation would make me look unhinged, and she would twist it. She always twisted everything. No, I needed evidence. I needed witnesses. I needed the HOA. I needed the police. I needed everyone to know exactly what she had done. So instead of storming to her front porch, I started with our neighbor, Mrs. Henderson. She lived across the street and saw everything. She'd mentioned before that Karen often watched our house from the sidewalk like some guard dog with a clipboard. I knocked on her door. Within seconds, the old woman opened it, her face lined with concern. "Dear, what's wrong? You look pale. Did you see Karen come to our house about 15 minutes ago?" I asked. Mrs. Henderson's eyebrows lifted. "Oh, she went in, sweetheart. I thought you let her." I felt my stomach twist. She didn't knock. She didn't ask. She walked straight in. Mrs. Henderson gasped. "Good heavens, did you see her leave?" "Yes. She came out in a hurry, muttering something about teaching people a lesson. I thought it was just her usual nonsense, but it wasn't nonsense." I swallowed hard. "She turned off my daughter's oxygen." The older woman clapped a hand over her mouth. No, she wouldn't, would she?" "She did," and Lily couldn't breathe. The horror on Mrs. Henderson's face hardened into something fiercer than I'd ever seen in her. "That monster," she whispered. I exhaled shakily. "Can I count on you to be a witness when I call the police?" Her answer came without hesitation. "Absolutely. And I'll get Mr. Henderson too. You are not fighting this alone." I thanked her and walked back home, but I didn't go inside yet, because Karen was sitting outside on her porch, legs crossed, sunglasses on, iced coffee in hand, smug, looking satisfied. I could feel her eyes on me. I could feel her waiting for me to explode. She wanted me to. She wanted me to lose control, so she could twist the entire story and make herself the victim. I wasn't giving her that, so I turned away, ignored her, and walked straight into the house. Once inside, I grabbed my phone, snapped photos of the oxygen machine's power switch position, the room, Lily's pale and exhausted face, even though it broke my heart to document it. I took pictures of the unplugged safety alarm Karen had yanked loose. I recorded a video explaining what had happened while the fear was still in my voice, because real emotion couldn't be faked later. Lily watched me silently, her eyes soft and glassy. She didn't understand. She didn't need to. I understood enough for both of us. When the documentation was done, I knelt in front of her. "I'm going to step outside for a few minutes," I said gently. "Mrs. Henderson will sit with you while Daddy makes a call. Okay?" She blinked and squeezed my hand. It was enough. I stepped outside and dialed 911. When the police car pulled into the neighborhood 15 minutes later, Karen stood up instantly, her faux concern already plastered across her face. "Oh good, officers," she called, walking toward them. "You're here about the noise violation. I've filed several reports. This family refuses to follow neighborhood guidelines," and the officer held up a hand. "Ma'am, we're here because the caller reported tampering with medical life support equipment." Karen froze. For a moment, just a split second, her mask cracked. Something sharp flickered in her expression, something guilty, something afraid, but she covered it quickly. "Medical equipment," she scoffed. "Oh please, that thing is barely a toaster. It doesn't need to be on all the time." I stepped out from behind the officer, my voice steady but cold. "You turned off my daughter's oxygen while she was using it. She almost suffocated." Karen laughed. She actually laughed. "I touched a switch. So what? It's a noise disturbance. The officer stiffened. Ma'am, tampering with medical support devices especially, knowingly is considered assault or reckless endangerment. Depending on the state, it can even be felony child endangerment. Karen's face went pale. Effelani. Over a noise complaint. Don't be absurd. I brought out my phone. I have photos. I have a time-stamped video. I have a neighbor who watched you go inside without permission. And I have a child who almost stopped breathing. Karen shook her head slowly, backing away as if the truth itself was radioactive. You're lying, she whispered. This is all exaggerated. This is character assassination. The officer didn't buy it. Ma'am, he said, stepping closer. Did you or did you not enter this man's home without permission? Karen swallowed. Her eyes darted around the street as neighbors emerged from their houses one by one, drawn by the flashing lights and raised voices. Did you turn off the device? The officer's tone sharpened. Karen hesitated. That was her mistake. Mrs. Henderson marched forward, cane in hand like a weapon. I saw you, she boomed. You barged in like a thief. And you came out smiling. You turned it off. Karen's face twisted. Mind your own business? You old. That's enough. The officer stepped between them. I had never seen Karen look afraid before. I had seen her angry, smug, petty, self-righteous, but fear was new. She wasn't afraid for Lily. She wasn't afraid for what she'd done. She was afraid of consequences. The officer turned to me. Sir, we need a formal statement. Ems is on the way to examine your daughter. Karen lunged forward. Wait, you can't just... The officer cut her off. Ma'am, step back. If the evidence supports the claim, you may be facing charges. And just like that, the entire neighborhood watched as Karen's world began to fall apart piece by piece, truth by truth. But I wasn't satisfied, not yet, because she had endangered my daughter's life. And Section 3 is where I decide to end Karen's reign permanently. The MS team arrived within minutes, and the flashing lights reflected off every window on the street. Neighbors had gathered in clusters now, whispering, some shocked, some furious. And a few those who secretly despised Karen looked like they were waiting for justice. They'd prayed for years to see. I stayed beside Lily as paramedics checked her vitals. Her oxygen levels were improving, but her heart rate was still too fast, and she kept glancing nervously toward the door, afraid Karen might reappear. She clung to my wrist with her small hand, refusing to let go. One paramedic knelt beside her and smiled gently. You're safe now, sweetheart, he murmured. Nobody's going to touch your machine again, I promise. Lily blinked slowly but didn't let go of me. Meanwhile, the officer questioned Karen at the end of the driveway. I couldn't hear every word, but her frantic hand gestures said enough. She kept insisting she had the right to enter my home HOA business. She said and that turning off the machine was maintenance compliance. Every time she spoke, her voice rose an octave, like desperation was tightening her throat, but the officer wasn't buying it, and neither was anyone else. After EMS cleared Lily to stay home as long as the oxygen remained stable, I stepped outside with the officer to finalize my statement. That's when the HOA president himself, Mr. Jonathan Hargrove, appeared. You could always tell when he was approaching because his cologne arrived a full 10 seconds before he did. He strutted down the street like he owned the concrete, his HOA badge clipped to his polo shirt. He took one look at the police presence and frowned like we were all inconveniencing him. What's the meaning of this? He demanded. Why are police in our neighborhood? This kind of disturbance is exactly why our HOA strives for order. Karen's face lit up like she'd been handed divine salvation. She rushed toward him. Jonathan, thank God you're here. They're trying to accuse me of something ridiculous, felony. Accusations because of a noise violation. Tell them the HOA rules allow us to intervene when members are violating decibel standards. Jonathan crossed his arms and looked at me like I was a stray dog on his lawn. What did you do now? I stared him dead in the eyes. She cut off my daughter's oxygen. Jonathan snorted. I highly doubt that. It's all recorded, I said calmly. Photos, video, witnesses, and the police are filing a report. If you want to defend her, you'll go down with her. His smile faltered. The officer cleared his throat. Sir, interfering with medical devices is not something the HOA has any authority over. And entering someone's home without permission, Jonathan raised a hand, cutting him off. Well, perhaps this is all a misunderstanding. Maybe the family is overreacting. They've already caused disruption with that loud. I stepped closer, my voice low and icy. Finish that sentence. I dare you. He hesitated. Behind us. Another neighbor, Mr. Ortiz, spoke up. Jonathan, we all heard Karen say she was going to handle it. She's been harassing this family for months. And she walked into their house, Mrs. Henderson added, like she owned it. Jonathan looked around, realizing for the first time that his usual dominance was slipping. The neighborhood that always feared him wasn't siding with him today. Karen grabbed his arm in a panic. Tell them, Jonathan. Tell them I'm right. You said you'd support me. Jonathan's eyes darted between the police, the witnesses, and me. He straightened his shirt. Karen, I think it's best if you don't mention the HOA anymore. She froze. What? You acted independently, he added quickly. The HOA cannot be associated with this incident. Karen's jaw dropped. You're abandoning me. He didn't answer. He stepped away from her like she was contagious, for the first time in her life. Karen looked truly unmoored, like the world wasn't bending the way she expected. She reached out toward him. Jonathan, we talked about this. You said if I made the neighborhood cleaner, quieter. He cut her off. You went too far. This is not HOA sanctioned. You're on your own. Her face twisted into something wild and panicked. She tried to approach the officer again. This is insane. I'm on the HOA board. I'm the enforcement chair. They can't treat me like a criminal. The officer held up a hand. Ma'am, please step back. Karen's hands trembled. Her voice shook. I didn't mean to hurt the child. I was just trying to make the neighborhood better. I stepped forward, staring her down. By taking away her oxygen, Karen's eyes darted toward me, filled with something between hatred and fear. You shouldn't have moved here, she whispered. People like you ruin neighborhoods. And that sealed her fate. The officer turned to me. Sir, based on the evidence and statements, we are moving forward with charges. We'll be filing for a warrant after reviewing the full report. Karen gasped. A warrant? For me? Mrs. Henderson yelled from behind. Finally, Karen stumbled back, shaking her head violently. No, they can't arrest me. The HOA, Jonathan, my position, my reputation. You should have thought about your reputation before you endangered a disabled child, the officer said sharply. Karen wasn't listening. Panic overtook her. She grabbed her purse and sprinted to her car. The officer shouted, but it was too late. Karen jumped into her SUV, the engine roaring to life. She backed out so fast she nearly sideswiped Mrs. Henderson's mailbox. Tires screeched. The neighborhood watched in stunned silence as she sped down the street like a criminal fleeing a scene. The officer sighed. Well, that makes things worse for her. Jonathan muttered under his breath. I can't be connected to this. And he practically ran back to his house. The officer turned back to me. We'll handle the legal side. But sir, if she's willing to run like that, I advise you to secure your home and stay vigilant. People like her don't accept consequences easily. I nodded because he was right. Karen wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. When the police left and the neighborhood dispersed, I carried Lily back inside. She rested her head on my shoulder, her breathing soft and slow. I tucked her into bed beside her oxygen machine, sitting with her until she fell asleep. Then I stood up, walked to my desk, and pulled out every HOA document I had, every guideline, every violation notice Karen had ever sent us, every letter she taped to our door. I laid them out neatly, one after another, like evidence in a case. Because she wasn't going to haunt us anymore. She wasn't going to threaten us anymore. Wasn't going to terrorize Lily anymore. This wasn't just about charges anymore. This was about destroying Karen's power completely. The HOA had abandoned her. Now it was my turn to dismantle everything she clung to legally, publicly, and permanently. That night, after Lily finally drifted into a peaceful sleep, I sat in the living room with only the glow of the lamp and the soft hum of her oxygen machine for company. My anger had cooled, but it hadn't weakened. Instead, it hardened, sharpened, turned into something clear and focused. Karen had crossed the line no human should ever cross, and I was done living in fear. I pulled out a notebook and began writing, listing everything she had done since we moved into this neighborhood: trespassing, harassment, false HOA, citations, threats, recording us without consent, accessing our mailbox, and, now, disablement of life support equipment. With every item, my resolve strengthened. The next morning, I contacted an attorney, a neighbor's recommendation, someone who specialized in HOA abuse cases. His name was Marcus Caldwell, and even through the phone, his confidence was unmistakable. You did the right thing calling me, he said. This is one of the worst cases of HOA misconduct and personal harm I've heard in years. Karen acted alone, I explained, but the HOA tried to cover for her until the police showed up. That's typical, Marcus replied, but trust me, this time they won't get away with it. He told me to gather every document, every message, every recording, and then he asked the question I didn't expect. Do you want to sue Karen only, or the entire HOA leadership for enabling her? I didn't hesitate. The entire HOA. Marcus chuckled darkly. Good, I'll prepare both cases. By noon, a police cruiser rolled through the neighborhood again. The officer from yesterday stepped out with a grim expression, but this time, he wasn't at my door. He was at Karen's. Apparently, she'd returned home late at night, thinking no one would notice. But the police had her address, had the witness statements, and had more than enough grounds. I watched from my porch as Karen answered the door in yesterday's clothes, her hair wild, her eyes lined with panic. Ma'am, the officer said calmly, a warrant has been issued for your arrest. Karen's mouth fell open. For what? For felony child endangerment, trespassing, and tampering with medical devices. The neighborhood fell dead silent. Karen tried to laugh it off. This is ridiculous. This is harassment. The officer turned her around and gently cuffed her wrists. The gasp that rippled across the street was almost satisfying. You can't do this to me, she screamed. I'm on the HOA board. I run this neighborhood. I walked closer, stopping at the edge of my lawn. You don't run anything anymore. She twisted toward me with a look of pure hatred. You ruined my life. No, I said coldly. You did that yourself. As the police guided her toward the cruiser, Karen lost all composure. You don't belong here, she screamed out the window. You and your sick kid ruined everything. Neighbors gasped. Phones came out. Plenty recorded the meltdown. And just like that, the world had proof of Karen's true character. But I wasn't done. 2 days later, Marcus and I met with the HOA board. The room smelled like new carpet and old arrogance. Jonathan sat at the head of the table, his face stiff and defensive. Let's just try to resolve this quietly, he said. No, Marcus replied. Quiet is what you want. Justice is what we want. I slid the stack of HOA violations onto the table pages of Karen's harassment. This is what your board allowed. You let her target us. You let her escalate. And you turned a blind eye until the police pulled up. Jonathan swallowed. Karen's actions were unauthorized. We cannot be held responsible. Marcus leaned forward. When a member of your board commits dangerous acts while representing your authority, the entire HOA can be held liable. And you knew she was unstable. You received complaints. You ignored them. Jonathan stammered. We didn't think it would go this far. That's the problem. I cut in. You never thought about anyone except yourselves. The board members shifted uncomfortably. Guilt was written across their faces. We're filing a civil lawsuit, Marcus said, sliding papers across the table, against Karen personally, and against your HOA for enabling her. Jonathan skimmed the document and his face went white. $500,000, he sputtered. That's just the starting point, Marcus said calmly. The room exploded into murmurs. One board member whispered, Jonathan, you said she was fine. Another hissed, this could bankrupt us. Jonathan glared at me. Is this about money? Revenge? No, I said evenly. It's about protecting my daughter and every family you've ever bullied. Right, then right. In that silent moment, every person in the room knew Reign of Terror was officially over. The fallout was immediate. The story spread beyond the neighborhood. Local journalists picked it up, then news stations, then parent advocacy groups. Everyone was outraged by what Karen had done. Everyone demanded accountability. The HOA board panicked. Jonathan resigned within a week. 2 other board members followed. And then something I didn't expect happened. One evening, I received a knock on the door. Nearly a dozen neighbors stood there, each holding a dish, a bag of groceries, flowers, toys for Lily, anything to show support. We're sorry, one woman said, voice trembling. We should have stood up to Karen years ago. Mr. Ortiz stepped forward. If you need help at any point during the lawsuit, we're with you. Mrs. Henderson gave a proud nod. This neighborhood is safer because of you. I swallowed hard, overwhelmed. For once, I didn't feel alone. As for Karen, she didn't stand a chance. Between the police charges and the civil lawsuit, she crumbled. During her trial, the footage of her screaming from the police car window was played on loop. Her own words destroyed her. She was convicted, sentenced to community service, mandatory counseling, and a hefty fine. She was removed from the HOA board permanently, and not long after, the lawsuit I filed ended with a settlement that changed everything. The HOA paid damages. Karen paid personal restitution. And the board adopted strict new oversight policies that protected families. Instead of terrorizing them, justice wasn't just served. It was transformed into a shield for the entire community. Months later, as life finally grew peaceful again, I sat beside Lily as she slept.